As a politician, I'm still, every Monday, I'm learning Te Reo Māori because I know I have to do more mihi or whai kōrero. It's one of the best visits that I've ever done in my career. Is I got to drive a tugboat, do donuts in it on the Waitemata Harbour.
But I also know behind every politician there is a story. But for you, what's your story?
Yeah, that was a real crossroads for me when I finished high school. And there was one pathway for me that was...
Hey everyone, welcome to the Zeducation Podcast. Before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask you. If you enjoy the show and get value from it, help us grow by sharing it. Send it to a friend, post it on social media, and don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. The bigger this community gets, the more powerful conversations we can bring you, or to help you unlock new levels of success in your personal and professional life. Thanks for being here, and now let's get into the episode. Well, thank you for joining us on the Zeducation Podcast. We have Shanan Halbert here, Labour MP, based out in North Coast.
Right.
It's so good. I mean, to get a politician onto the podcast, I know how busy you guys can get. I mean, we're just very grateful. But before we get into this awesome conversation, Shanan, just a little disclaimer for our audience out there. Just to be clear, Zeducation or the Zeducation Podcast does not endorse any political party. Neither is this a political podcast, but we do believe in providing a platform that we can learn from anything and anyone. Whether it's their stories, their experience, their skills, we can learn from anybody to help us do well in work, but also in life. So we're grateful to have Shanan here with us today. Shanan, I just must say before we get into it, your social media is on. I've been following you for a while. It's very engaging. In fact, this is how we initiated this in the first place, was I reached out to you on Instagram, and then to have you respond as well. It's so cool. So cool. But I also know behind every politician there is a story. I mean, they all have a drive. I mean, they all believe in something, right? They all want to create change, good change from their point of view. But for you, what's your story? Take us back to the beginning. I know that you were raised in Hawke's Bay, your whakapapa around there. There's a beautiful story there. And then also your passion for education and how that came about.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's on my social media, I try to do exactly that and portray stories to tell what my day looks like, to show people the things that I care about, the things that I want them to care about, and what's of interest to them. And that really comes from, yes, I grew up in the Hawke's Bay. Dad was Māori. We come from Ngāti Whiti, which is just inland in the Rangitike. Mum worked at Pack and Save, for a couple of decades. And so it was really humble upbringings for me. I'm the youngest of five, 3 brothers, 1 sister. And, in some senses, I had the best of both worlds from a Māori and Pākehā perspective. Dad learnt Te Reo Māori at the age of 42, and he retrained as a teacher from being a freezing worker when all the works closed down the coast. And so that was the first time that education really came into our family's household. When Dad became a teacher, that meant more pūtea, more money more regular pūtea coming into the household. We could afford the things that we needed at a basic level. And that gave our family a sense of security, I guess. But Dad had a vision for me and for our whānau. He knew the importance of education. He knew where that could take us. And so he opened those doors for me, really. He brought me into the classroom to work alongside of him, to support him in kura. I taught his kids to swim, and so I was really lucky to be a part of him teaching, particularly in kura kaupapa. And so understanding the value of Te Reo Māori, even though I'm a learner myself and continue to learn, appreciating the concepts of Te Ao Māori and what they bring to our life. And now as a politician too, I bring that experience to, whether it be my social media and using as much Te Reo Māori as possible, because I think it's important for our country. Bringing those values in place, kotahitanga, is really important to me. And that's something I take forward from my upbringing with my dad. I like to bring people together. And in difficult times, you know, globally, at a national level and at a local level here in Tamaki, you know, we've got to work on the things that we agree on, that the things that bring us together, that unite us as a country, rather than the things that divide us. And so a lot of those things have really come from my upbringing. I speak, you know, a lot about my dad, but equally, you know, my mum ran the house. She was the real boss. She was the worker behind, I guess, how I live my life now, which is, you know, I work hard. We serve our community. She was the social butterfly. You know, I am too. I love people, and you know, therefore, the role that I play as a politician now is about people. You know, he aha te mea nui o te ao, ki atu he tangata, he tangata, he tangata.
I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I believe that our upbringing influences who we become in the future. And obviously your parents,
Mm.
you know, I also believe that parents should be the first teachers. You know, not relying dependently on, you know, secondary schools or primary schools, but it should start in the home. And literally your parents were your teachers, which was amazing. Now I'm curious to know what made the shift. So dad went from freezing works to like education. What was the thinking behind that? Like, you know, like, yeah, maybe I should try being a teacher.
Yeah, at that particular time, the freezing works closed down in Hawke's Bay, and there were a bunch of job losses. And at the same time, there was an introduction of those that could speak Māori. We needed a teacher workforce in that area. The government offered a one-year teaching program to enable more Māori to step into primary school teaching. He took that up. He had to move to Wanganui and be away from the whānau for a period of time while he studied. And one particular thing I liked about that is that they really doubled down on the work placement. So a lot of the learning that he did was in the classroom using te reo Māori, and then a lot of study in the background for him to get his degree.
That's awesome. And at the age of 42, he said he started the journey of learning te reo.
Yeah, for
Māori.
42 he started learning te reo, and I think it was around his 50s that he retrained as a kura kaupapa Māori teacher. You know, so that's significant change for somebody at that age. I'm now that age, 42, and so, you know, you feel the sense of responsibility of the next couple of decades in your life, what you want to achieve, what you need to achieve, and how you're going to do that.
Wow. And then obviously, you know, you've got 15 years that led on to 15 years of education leadership,
Mm.
right? And from there, and most of your career was in that space before you got into politics. Now, I'm pretty interested to hear about that experience, you know, what you saw and experienced in that space of time, especially with Māori and Pasifika when it came to education. What did you see were some of the things that were challenging for our people, but at the same time, some of the things that would help them as well?
Yeah, that was a real crossroads for me when I finished high school. And there was one pathway for me that was stay back home in Hawke's Bay, work for a couple of years, earn some money, and then potentially think about what I wanted to do. My dad was really clear as you need to go to university. For me, that was in Auckland, and I chose to study a undergraduate degree in the arts. And I chose the arts because I wanted a degree, a qualification that could give me a good launch pad into a career. But at the same time, I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to study. And so that was the degree that I chose. And I absolutely loved my experience at university, in the hostels as well, you know, having that wider family, meeting people that, you know, potentially I wouldn't have met in Hawke's Bay, and having those life experiences that have really influenced me right up until today, and a group of friends that I still have from 20 years ago, you know, that are part of my life now. But I've always wanted to pay it forward since then, because if that opportunity was opened up for me, I have a responsibility to ensure that I open up those opportunities for other Māori and Pacific or any vulnerable group that don't have the access to higher learning that I had. I count myself very lucky, and my life has been better for the opportunity that I have had. One of the challenges in front of us, of course, is that we still have access issues to higher learning, and that's for people that study at Polytech or Wānanga or at university. That it's, life is increasingly more expensive at the moment. People literally struggle it was expensive and unaffordable back in my day, but now, it's even more unaffordable for people to be able to commit to full-time study, to have a part-time job, and to achieve the qualification that they need. When it comes to our Māori and Pacific community, it's always that much more difficult to have the foundation learning for them, to have the greater family commitments, and just the access to those learning opportunities that they need. And so it's our job, both now in opposition and in a future government, to ensure that we're breaking down those barriers as much as we can. That even the basic things like ensuring that half-price public transport comes back to support young people to get from home to their study to work, because that's one of the barriers that tertiary students tell me is in place for them at the moment. It's too expensive for them to get to university, and we know that people learn better face-to-face than potentially we do online all the time. So, unlocking those barriers is really important to me. And, part of my job at the moment is talking to people, going and visiting institutions and going, what are the barriers that we need to unlock?
Nice. I like that. What's your advice for, any learner in tertiary, for example, who's on that journey? What are some things that they got to be mindful of they could influence their educational journey? Sometimes people switch off when it comes to politics, the macroeconomics, but they're important because those things have a lot of moving parts, could ultimately affect you and your career and your education, right? And I also know there's got to be a balance, like just focus on what you can control as well, right? Right in front of you. But speaking to people out there, not to get too political, but, what are some things that they have to be mindful of they could ultimately affect, like their education and their career?
Yeah. So it starts with self, right? If you are able to gain a qualification, whether that be as a builder, in arts like me, or as a medical professional, that your life trajectory and the life of your whānau is going to be better as a result, simply because you're going to earn a wage that is higher, much higher than the minimum wage, that puts people into poverty, to be frank. And so it gives you a leg up. It means that you're more able to pay the bills that you need to and to live the life that you choose to. But what I think is more important is the contribution that you're able to make to your immediate family, the opportunities that you then create for future generations in your family, that your kids are also much more likely to access higher education and therefore to live a good life. But also the role that you can play back in your own community in, like I was saying, paying it forward and going, okay, well, how can I create change for others? Because we all have a moral obligation to set the path, for those that are around us. And I really take that seriously. And so for anyone studying, it's like, go hard, work hard and complete your studies, because that's your ticket. But then the next step is the ask. Once you got your ticket, we all have a responsibility to give back.
I like that. And I feel like that's also a Pasifika and Māori frame,
That's how we think, right?
Approach.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're thinking community, you're thinking family as well. It's not just about you. I do see a correlation there between, get a qualification, get a degree, and it can lead to better opportunities, right? But then, what are your thoughts around, like, okay, cool, I'm into a job now, and people who might feel a little bit stuck there, be like, I'm working in the same job for 10 years. I got that degree, but how do I get more money? How do I move up in a career? Because a lot of the people get stuck there. So they've got their foot in the door, but how do they progress? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, and learning doesn't stop, right? So getting your initial ticket or graduate program is your first part that you're completing. But then there's different opportunities that come up in your workplace that you absolutely should take. Sometimes, it's about how do you go from where you are as a entry-level staffer to middle management, and then middle management into becoming the CEO. Those are the opportunities that we want to create for people. So you have to be open to learning all the time. And then even outside of work, you've got to think about what else can I add to my kete, not only for my current employer, but thinking about the future jobs that I might want to put myself forward for. As a politician, I'm still, every Monday, I'm learning Te Reo Māori because I know that as I grow in politics, I have to do more mihi or whai kōrero. And so I've got to prepare myself now for inevitably what I know is coming. Because I have to play a leadership role out in our communities, which means I have to get up and speak in Māori for a period of time to acknowledge the people that we're meeting. That instills the fear in me, but I've got to do the hard yards now to prepare me for when that time comes. But if I go back to it, is for anyone, is we've got to keep on learning. We've got to achieve the things that we want to. But again, I go back to, we've got to ensure that we're bringing other people with us, because there isn't no I in team, whether you're in your own workplace, whether you're in your own whānau or in your own community or church. There's no I in team. It's about collective achievement.
I love that. And it's pretty much the theme and pattern that you're just repeating time and time again throughout this conversation is the we, and paying it forward. I like that mindset. Take us to the moment where you decided that politics was the next thing that you wanted to do. So 15 years of education leadership in this space, and now transitioning to politics. Tell us about that moment, that decision.
Politics has never been a straightforward one for me. So at school, I was the guy that liked to organise things, fundraisers, 40-hour famine. I was the social butterfly that got on with everyone, from my seniors to juniors to teachers. And that sort of translated into university and becoming part of the Students' Association. But really, politics for me came back to the first election that I really understood well was when Helen Clark became Prime Minister. And the tagline was closing the gaps, if you remember. Might have been before your time. But New Zealand was sort of confronted by levels of poverty, high unemployment, low incomes, and that sort of motivated me to get involved in politics and, for me, the Labour Party, because I knew we needed to change the government, that I thought that there's better opportunities for people in New Zealand out there, and I needed to do a bit of work to support the outcome that I wanted to see. But for me personally, politics hasn't been straightforward. That it took me a number of years supporting, organising, campaigning, supporting others to get elected, and then your time comes. And so my first stand was in 2017, and I went up against the then Minister of Health, which is quite confronting. It's a real challenge. But my success there was that I brought back a majority of 9,000 back to 5,000, but lost. And then in 2018, I found myself in a by-election because that person had resigned, but pulled that majority back to 1,000. And then in 2023, at the height of our popularity, won by 3,000. Wow. And so you have to, like any job, you've got to work hard to create incremental change, to celebrate your little wins along the way, and eventually you get there. But in the last election, I lost. And so, that hits you personally. but I was re-elected as a list MP, and so you have to adapt to and change, because I was just grateful for being back in Parliament, right? It's such a privilege to be able to serve your community in that place. But because you give it so much that, when things are disappointing, you can take it personally, but you got to get up. You got to do it again, because there's a group of people out there that need your advocacy, need you to represent them. And so,
Wow.
get back up and do it. And here I am. And so I found myself in tertiary education after a long career pre-politics. And I was thinking, driving out here today, man, I used to come out to Māngere every day for work at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. So, that's the role you play. And if I get to play that role in the future as the Minister of Tertiary Education, there's a lot of great things that we can achieve together.
Oh man, I have a lot of respect for the work that you do. Like you said, it's not easy, and I think some people forget that politicians are humans, and that there are ups and downs as well. You talked about, you putting your heart and soul into something, and then sometimes you face defeat, and it's like, how do you still got to deal with that loss, and right, but get back up on your feet and not give up, because you're pulled by a strong purpose that's bigger than you. Now, when I watch politics and I see it on social media, everyone sees it now. Everyone's got their comments and stuff to say about it. But to see politicians stand up and to speak takes a lot of courage. It's not just speaking well, but speaking from a place, where they believe in something. Like, tell us about what it's like to speak in Parliament in person. I mean, on camera. Oh man, these guys are so confident in that. It's like, man, I wish I could never do that. Far out. These guys are awesome. Like, tell us what it's like, and what do you do preceding that to help you, be prepared? Because, like, for our audience, there's going to be moments where they do public speaking, where they have to prepare something very important. Any advice for that?
Yeah, one of the challenges that I've overcome in my 4.5 years in politics, in Parliament, is being comfortable being me, and my authentic self, and the knowledge and experiences that I bring to this place, right? When I first started, you throw in speeches that you might not know much about, or your inhibitions get a hold of you, and you think that you have to do the most amazing speech of your career, and you don't even know the subject matter. But I've come to a place now of being comfortable feeling uncomfortable, and in that, looking at the speech topic and bringing my own experiences into it. A topic like tax might come in, and you have to do a 10-minute speech on tax. Well, I'm not a qualified tax person or an expert in any sense, but I understand the investment in social services, or the impact of having a good health system, or our kids being able to go to a school and having good resources available and having school lunches. Those are the things that a good tax system are able to achieve if that's what we choose as New Zealand. And so that's my spin on it. And I've got comfortable talking on key issues that I normally wouldn't be able to speak on.
Hey, quick break. If you're an employer or business owner who's passionate about investing in your people, Zeducation can help. We're a trusted training provider offering literacy and numeracy programs to build essential skills alongside leadership, communication, conflict management, and even tech training in Microsoft Excel and AI. We also provide financial education on budgeting, home ownership, and retirement, as well as personal well-being programs. Plus, we deliver cultural diversity training to help create more inclusive and high-performing workplaces. Not sure what your people need? That's okay. We can help with that too. We offer needs analysis to identify skill gaps and ensure all training aligns with your business goals, developing the right capabilities to drive real success. What makes us even more cooler, we're a proudly Pasifika and Māori-owned business, and we know how to truly engage and empower our people. So if you're ready to level up your team, get in touch with us today at www.zeducation.co.nz. Now, back to the episode. And I can also imagine, because like every MP gets assigned, a portfolio, right? Whether it's, workforce, immigration, for example, or tertiary. Let's say that it's like, hey, yeah, this is new to me. Like, where do you start, getting familiar, understanding, so you can actually influence and make real change in that space? Like, how do you go about starting?
I get most of my insights from talking to people. That's how I learn best. So at the moment, I'm doing a circuit across the country to get to as many tertiary institutions as I can to understand where they're at, what their priorities are, and particularly the issues that are confronting them at the moment. Other people, and I have to do an amount of this too, is reading. You have to be on top of every media article that comes out of what the minister has said on a particular issue. You have to read annual reviews and documents and reports and consultation documents that are out there, so you understand the key subject matter area that you're involved in. And over time, it's like accelerated learning. You pick it up really quickly, and then you piece together a position. For us, we have a core set of values that we apply. That's our lens on policies that we make, on statements that we make. And for us, it's about how do we create a fairer society.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you take us to what the conversation is like with the team? So I don't know what it looks like, but in my mind, it's like a roundtable discussion. You guys got together, you're collaborating, discussing important stuff, issues, challenges, and co-creating solutions or suggestions. What is that conversation like, and what does it sound like when you guys are coming together? The party, the group, the team.
Yeah. So I'm lucky to be a part of a huge movement, that is the Labour Party. There's us in Parliament, but there's thousands of members across Aotearoa that are a part of our movement, fighting for the same things that are important. Access to education, quality healthcare, enabling people to have good and well-paid jobs. Those are the things that consistently matter for all of us, and the things that we are focused on. So you feel well supported in that sense. You're like a family, but just like any family, they will hold you accountable if you're not true to your values, right? True to our kaupapa. And so you're constantly balancing what's the priority for our members and how does that resonate with the general public. Because the public might think one way, but our values and our members have a particular focus area that they want to achieve. So in education, as an example, we believe in a public education system that is well-resourced, right? This government has put forward a private education model that are called charter schools. That doesn't achieve the same access or funding equity that we want every young person in New Zealand to be able to access, right? Why should, in one system, students be funded 3 times more than those in a public system? Why can't we have a free school lunch program, that is nutritious, that is free, and that is delivered at the time that our kids have lunch? Why has that become such a big thing for the current government and for New Zealand, when actually we had a program that worked really well? And in Auckland alone, for example, at the moment we have 1 in 4 tamariki that are going hungry on a daily basis. That's not our New Zealand. That's not generally how New Zealanders. That's not what New Zealand wants. They care about children. They don't want kids to be hungry. And so it's become a political football for something that is an absolute basic. If our kids don't have food in their tummies, they aren't engaged in their learning.
I mean, it makes total sense, all that stuff, right? Like, in order to truly achieve your potential, you've got to be able to have the basics, right? You can't think about future career and all these big ideas if you can't even fill your tummy or your puku, right, with food. So definitely understand that. But something that you've mentioned time and time again throughout the conversation is values, like manakitanga, kotahitanga. How do you guys go about, making sure that people resonate with those values through the work that you guys do?
Yeah. So when I talk about a fairer society and ensuring that our all of our kids have access to a basic meal, right, and a warm, dry home and a quality education, those are the conversations where what I'm trying to achieve is to bring everyone together on what are the foundations for a good society. If every child grows up in our community and they have a good education, as I started today, that sets up a good pathway for them and for future generations. That will impact on the problems that our society faces. Some of the youth crime stats in Auckland have been off the charts. They haven't changed in the past 2 years. Offences are still taking place, but the solutions don't offer an alternative way forward, and that's problematic for society moving forward. For me, kotahitanga is absolutely about bringing everyone together. Doesn't always mean that we agree, right?
Yeah.
But once we've made a decision that we're moving forward as one. And post-COVID, I think that's really difficult because at that particular time, New Zealanders inherited a decision which was about immunisation to keep everyone safe from the coronavirus. But now we have to bring everyone back together, and race relations, the treaty principles bills, are examples of politics that have created division, the opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So when I think of myself, dad's Māori, mum's Pākehā, I've grown up in a New Zealand that I believe is about all of us. It's not just about being Māori and it's not just about being Pākehā. It's about celebrating both sides of my whakapapa, understanding them both and being able to speak and share and to learn from both sides. And that's the New Zealand I believe in. And so kotahitanga is the one that I apply.
Yeah, I love that. Well, hey, just listening to you, you're really grounded in your values and grounded in your roots and where you come from, which is amazing. I also see on your social media, you're pretty good at connecting with different stakeholders out there in the community. You're out there, you're busy, you're engaged, and I love it. Hence one of the reasons why I wanted to get you onto the podcast. And, building relationships with employers. I think I saw one post where you're out with the Port of Auckland, you're in one of the machines. I was like, man, this guy, this guy is cool. Tell us about how do you build those relationships, especially with big employers like that. And I'm pretty sure you get people who go, I don't want to talk to you. Right? It's not everyone's going to open their door. But tell us, how do you go about building those relationships, especially for our audience?
Different ways of engaging is important, and you've got to be clever about the ways that you engage. I've been lucky to do a lot of work in transport and infrastructure because it's such a huge issue for our city. And if you ever get the chance to go to the Port of Auckland, it's one of the best visits that I've ever done in my career. Is I got to drive a tugboat, do donuts in it on the Waitemata Harbour. Donuts, yeah. And I got to walk out on those high cranes across the harbour, I've never been up that high. But what that enabled me to do is to have, conversations with the workers on the ground, for them to talk about their families, the things that are important to them, particularly their work environment, some of the successes that they've had at the port, for example, of bringing the organisation and their union representatives together, and they've carved a path for a much stronger organisation for everyone, that's still profitable, that's still achieving the things that businesses want, that as a business they want to achieve. So, you wouldn't be able to draw on those experiences if you weren't out on the tugboat with the workers doing donuts, having laughs and building that relationship. Similarly, when I'm at a university in O Week, is being able to change my approach, getting out of my suit, getting into my more comfortable clothes of jeans and a t-shirt. getting down to people's level, to just reach into what's important to them, what matters most to them, articulating, I guess, what as Labour, for my party, what that is relevant, but taking away particularly where we might have gaps, where we're not connecting, where we need to work harder. And I always think about, if we do have the privilege to be a future government, what do these people want me to achieve for them? Because ultimately, next time you see them, you got to go back and tell them what you've achieved, right? You can't go back and have the same conversation about employment rights and nothing's changed. And I'm not that type of politician. I like to get things done. One of my strengths and my weaknesses with people is I say how it is. And not all politicians do that. Sometimes as politicians we have to dress things up. But I prefer to be really honest with people, to manage expectations where I can. But when we get to overachieve, we get to celebrate that too.
Sounds like it's a cool job. I mean, hanging out with them and doing donuts. sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what I love about that is you're hanging out with them, you're getting to know them and understanding them, some of the challenges, and I love that.
Sometimes the truth hurts though, right? And so when I say that this job is a privilege, I liken it to having extreme highs and extreme lows all in the same day. And so you'll meet people that really love what you're doing. You're doing a great job, love how you achieve this. And then in the next corner, in the afternoon, you'll meet someone who says how terrible you are, how destructive some of your decisions have been when you were in government.
Tell us about that. I mean, it sounds stressful. It sounds there's a lot of highs and extreme lows. How do you keep yourself level-headed? How do you still look after your well-being despite all of that?
Yeah. The honest answer there is I don't. That it's always a work in progress for me. Sometimes I'm really good at it, and sometimes I absolutely fail. My basic goals is get 10,000 steps in every day. If I can get 5,000 in at the start of the day by taking the dog for a walk, that really helps my mental health and how the rest of my day rolls out. If I don't get it in, then it never goes as well. And, it impacts on my health similarly. You've got to keep in check around what you're eating because there's food galore. You're lucky enough to go to different places. Everyone wants to put on a kai. You got to manage that. And then when things are a bit stressful, I guess one of the hardest things is that you're not taking your mahi home with you, or that you're able to share that with your whānau, but not impact them at the same time. I choose to be a politician. My family doesn't, right? And so you need to manage that yourself responsibly because, probably like many, I would go home and pour my heart out every day about all of the bad experiences. But that's not fair in my family because this is a job that I signed up for. But, you'll see on my social media that, my go-to is my German Shepherd named Fitty. He's my boy and, he's my comfort in that sense as well.
Yeah. Like I said, I have a lot of respect and I look up to politicians in general. It's not easy, especially when you're out there in the public eye for people to judge and have their comments and things to say. You see a lot of stuff on the news, you see a lot of stuff on social media. Everyone's got their 5 cents, right? What is that like? How do you manage all of that stuff? Because, social media is hard to control. People will just find one little thing and then blow it up, right?
Yeah. So
when that happens, and it's happened to a lot of politicians, I've seen it, right? How do you deal with those backlashes, Especially for our audience, sometimes things like that might happen to them. Maybe not that big, but something similar.
Yeah. You're quite vulnerable in this job because you don't always have the right of reply. And so because of my sexuality, is that there's some pretty scathing comments that come through on my social media that are unfair, just mean. And at the end of the day, it's actually usually not people from my community. It's not people that would ever vote for me. And so over time, I've had to build resilience to be able to manage that, manage how personally I take it or not. And some of it, I think, there might be something in some comments that are more constructive. There might be something in that, and what can I take from that? But each day is different because, the way I receive something today isn't necessarily how I receive a comment tomorrow. And so you can carry that, if you look at a mean comment and it upsets you and you take it personally, you can carry that for the rest of your day, and it impacts on everything else that you're doing. Every politician, I believe, no matter which party, has signed up to this job because they want to create change. They're doing it for the right reasons. And so when people are just being mean for mean's sake on social media, I think that's unfair. I think that's hard to take for all of us, because politicians do work hard, and they genuinely care for the work that they are doing. How do we manage that? That I think as social media evolves, we've got to take a bit of responsibility as just general humans about how we treat each other, no matter who you are. Because just how people might be mean to me on social media, there's someone in the general public who, is receiving the same sort of comments. So they're the people I care for the most. Potentially we need to change some social media rules. It worries me that Meta have changed some of their protection mechanisms in social media. That makes our rainbow community more vulnerable to being targets, some of our ethnic communities as well. So, we've always got to think about our duty of care. How do we manage freedom of speech and hate speech? Freedom of speech isn't hate speech. Everyone has the right to how they think, but when it translates into hate speech, which is we discriminate against others because of who they are, that is not okay. And that's the part that we need to protect people from.
Interesting. And yeah, social media is a double-edged sword. I also see that you guys use it as a powerful tool to get your messages and to influence your communities and other people out there. I see all different parties. Even the Prime Minister himself is on TikTok and Instagram, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job. Tell us about using social media to help you guys with your campaigns, your work, and to influence change. How important is social media for you guys?
Oh, incredibly important, because of the instant messaging that it puts out to communities, right? And so much is about speed in politics, how quickly you can get ahead of the narrative, how quickly you can get your message out there. So social media is an incredible platform to enable us to do that. If the government does something, we need to get an opposing message out, something that reflects us and our values. If we don't agree with something, we need a group of New Zealand to understand why, but most of all, that they understand that we are advocating for them. That's our job. In opposition, currently our job is to hold the government to account for the decisions that they are making on all of our behalf. So the platform itself, is our biggest tool to be able to achieve that. Even when it comes to communicating with journalists, right? Journalists' first go-to will be our social media page and what has Shanan said about X, Y, and Z. They're the commentary that will be taken forward into reporting online or into print or, on One News. And so, with that, we've got to make sure our messaging on social media has a lot of discipline, that what I say is consistent with what my leader and party would say. Because if I say something, then that afternoon, Chris Hipkins might have to, respond to that if a journalist asks. And so keeping on message is really important. I prefer to share really positive comments. I think part of my transition from being in government to opposition is having to be more negative, because that's how our democratic system works. You have the ayes and the nays, you have government and opposition. Mm-hmm. So my job now is in opposition. And that doesn't mean, I like to talk about opportunity and vision, how we're going to get things done, and particularly creating solutions to the problems that are in front of us. Opposition is more about negating the decisions that have been made, helping people to understand why these are bad decisions and potentially why we could have done better. It's a real balance between my natural leadership style, which, when I talk about kotahitanga, or I talk about leadership being about service to our communities, there's a grind, I think, between opposition politics, because negative social media can also turn people off, it turns them off because it feels like one tone, where I prefer that my content is more inspirational, so people keep coming back, for the positive messaging, that they feel good, they feel motivated by the content that I produce. There might be a bit of dopamine that goes with that as well, and so that's how I try to create a regular following.
I love that. I love the idea of, obviously we need opposition. There's opposition in all things, but then so people can see different perspectives and then make their own decision, their own choice, right? Look, as we're drawing closer to the end of the podcast, Shannon, it's just been so good to sit here and hear about all these things that a politician goes through, and also your story and your upbringing. What's influenced some of the amazing mahi that you do today? 2 final questions. My first one is, in your experience and career in politics, what's been some of your proudest moments?
The first piece of legislation that I was heavily involved in was banning conversion practices in New Zealand. We went from a space where we thought, maybe this happened in our past in New Zealand. Definitely this might happen in places like America or offshore. But when we looked into it more, we understood that many of our young people were being told that who they were was wrong because it didn't align with particularly colonial views. That legislation stopped conversion practices from being done here in New Zealand, and some serious stuff, young people being electrocuted to take away the choices that they made in life. That's not right in any society. I've always stood for uplifting our young people. You be you, celebrate who you are, because I believe that a strong identity builds confidence and resilience for adult life. If we take that away from young people, tell them that who they are isn't right, then they lose that, and that sets them off on a really difficult pathway and feeds into their mental health as well. And so that's an important piece of work that I've done. Second to that, when I think about the mahi that I've been involved in with Labour in government, when we implemented lunch in schools to feed our kids, when we took away compulsory donations for kids to have to go to school. They're no longer there by choice of that school. When we made the first year free in tertiary education to enable access for higher learning, those are the key things that I think help families to improve education outcomes for their children and young people. So I want to do more of that, and I'm not comfortable with where things are at politically here and now. I'm concerned that there has been a negative focus on Māori, on people with disabilities, on our rainbow community, and I don't think that's fair. I want us politically to be focused on the economy, on having good jobs for people, because unemployment is going up at the moment too. We want to ensure that there's good health care available, that we can take our kids to the doctor when they need to and not be concerned about the costs of it. And the other big one for us is we just need to build as many warm, dry homes as possible, because we're still short of stock in the city of ours. The homelessness that we experience is significant. It's growing, and so it's the role of the state, of us as a government, to build homes for people to live in, because that is the secure space for all families.
Beautiful. Love that. And our final question is for our audience, because it's all about helping them do well in their work and also in life. Any final words of encouragement or anything from our conversation today that you want to have them take away?
Yeah. I always go back to work hard. Mahia te mahi. If you are a hard worker, then naturally you will achieve better outcomes for yourself. But similarly, there is no I in team. We must bring others with us, and that's an important part of the role that we play in our communities and in life.
Beautiful. I love that. Nice way to end the podcast. Thank you again, my friend Shanan Halbert. It was wonderful to have a conversation with you on this Zeducation Podcast. We wish you all the best.
Kia ora, tēnā koe.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. If this conversation gave you something valuable, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit the follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. This show is all about helping you unleash your greatness, and the more we grow, the more we can bring you content that truly makes an impact. Thanks for being part of the Zeducation Podcast. Let's keep pushing forward, and I'll see you next time.